Dear people, welcome to right where you are, wherever that is. It's actually lovely to be looking back into Konani House after all this time. We're here too. We're with you, and you're with us in this sort of internet of Indra, which is another form of play that links us all up. I sort of felt that at this end of the year, and this end of what we could almost carefully call the COVID era, it was a lovely idea to just notice what is rarely spoken of, but is completely obvious, which is that our practice is a very deep form of play, a deep form of adult play. Right now here, where I am, the wind is playing fiercely with everything in sight. Nothing is not at its mercy. This, what Uncle Max would call Kurakarai wind spirit, it's here in a big way. And if you haven't noticed already, we can never know what will happen next. I mean, this is the very fundamental ground of play. You do not know what will happen next. I mean, for example, this morning here in Kunani House, a crow appeared to offer Teisho quite loudly and had to be dealt with in some mysterious way that none of us understand, and probably least of all the crow, but that's part of the play as well. We don't try to grasp it with explanatory means. We let it play with us. And crows are very playful. One time they woke up Ikkyu, the great playful Japanese poet, calligrapher, the one responsible for saying, it's attention, 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 nothing but attention, noticing, being alive to what is happening. So Ikkyu was lying in a boat on Lake Biwa, meditating, maybe dreaming and meditating, and a crow call across that lake shook him free of himself completely, shook off his heavy self and set him free. The whole universe is asking to dance with us, to play with us. Hakuin says, singing and dancing are the voice of the law. How boundless and free is the sky of Samadhi then? So I sort of circled back to this question of playfulness, partly because a number of people recently have written to me about Upside Down Zen and said how much they have valued that book. People from all over the world, it seems like it's having a little bit of a revival of some sort. And in that book, I wrote a chapter about, which I call the great way of play. And it seems to me that even more deeply now than when I wrote that back in 2002 or 3, it feels to me that this tilt of the spirit, that is our Zen spirit, is essentially playful, it's curious, it is engaged, it is imaginative, and it is freely creative. These are elements that should not be missed. Should not be missed any more than the fact that although Zen rarely speaks of love, it is actually nothing but love, nothing but love. Not sticky, sentimentalizing love, but very clear, plain, ordinary, abundant love that's everywhere on offer when we notice that it is. And as I said in the sort of words about this morning, this morning's talk, if you're in any doubt about the fact that that play is deeply serious, then just ask a child. Or, as I said, dare to interrupt a serious child's game, and you'll find out how serious it is, how it is not to be interrupted. It is a place of close inquiry. Any play, any form of play, let's extend that wider to see that it includes art. It includes, you could almost say, games in the sense of, let's step outside ourselves. Let's organize the space here with some rules that in a way restrict the choices and find out what we can find out then. Now, isn't that a fair description of Zazen, practiced together in a quiet place? A form of serious adult play. I can remember the first full day of sesshin of my life. I remember it very, very clearly. Excuse me. It was at Gorrick's Run in northwest of Sydney. And it seemed to me that it was the longest day of my life. In the best possible way. I first noticed that just as the light was fading. And I suddenly realized I have been here for every single beat of the light, from dark to this moment when it's fading away again. And I could not say how long that was. It was at least as long as my life. It had that feeling of being released back in a way to the kind of time that children live in, which is complete in every moment. It doesn't lean forward very far into the next moment. It doesn't try to arrange itself in preparation for the next moment. It just is. And that is what a sesshin day offers us, to just most purely be, with the support of each other in also holding that space. Now, it takes a certain rigor, but so does love. Love is rigorous with us. Love shapes us. Love creates character, it creates backbone, it creates strength, it creates love, and love gives itself away. So this is so deeply stitched in, silently stitched in, with those invisible stitches that you have to learn to do when you make a rakusu. It stitches us in. The form itself, this deep form of adult play, stitches us in, not just to the silence and stillness of the mind growing quieter, more available, and your senses growing keener, more alive. It stitches us into each other. It lets us feel the interconnectedness of all that is in that keen state. So I would say that playful is in fact natural to emptiness. It is the place where we learn in a way to turn things around, to break our customary form of mind that holds everything subtly at bay, and to be in direct skin to skin, breath to breath contact with what is. To dare to do that, to find out what it is, to dare to do that. There's daring in every form of play. I mean, apart from anything else, you dare to lose your self-importance. You dare to lose even your supposed dignity. You dare to lose your sense of an adult face composed from all angles for acceptability. And so this is a great freeing that is intrinsic to the way of Zen. It's like practice turns us upside down and shakes all the kinds of expectations out of our pockets. Actually, that's a lovely thing to do. I can remember at Sesshin in Gorrick's Run, it was a great thing that I discovered one day. I was stretching while waiting for a shower outside the shower block or the shower bathhouse. And so I was sort of doing some yoga stretches, and I stood where I was lowered myself down, bent right down and looked backwards between my legs. And suddenly the upside down world appeared. And it was so beautiful. It was so remarkable. You know, the, the earth above, the sky below, and each thing so solitary and connected at once. Each thing was sort of luminous in that light. It was alive. It was like looking at things the way I think the earth looks at things and looks at us. I really recommend it. Anytime you want to see things clearly, stand where you are, turn your back to the view, bend down and look back through your legs at just what is. So that's another sort of way of catching sight of the imposture of our minds that hold things in a particular way that is not quite here, not quite synchronous with what is, not quite congruent. Why not let ourselves back in? So that upside down gaze, it's very relaxed, it's very receptive, and it finally sees that we don't have to arrange things in advance of each moment of our lives. So that fluid quality of child play, you know, remember when you used to sort of make up worlds and all it took was saying, just say, and then you just said what was. You know, just say, a game I used to play with my sister was just say, we're in the fourth form at St. Clair's. We made this school up. And it was full of characters who we knew by name, and they had character faults, very interesting character faults, which we could play with and move around with. But all it took was saying, let's say, or just say. And then the world opens with that sense of possibility. Now, in a way, Zazen is asking us to say, just say it is not what you think. What we think can kind of coat over what is. So every breath of Zazen lets go of what you think and lets it be. Lets it be. Lets it step forward. There's a lot of feel, for me at least, from my years of practice, that our practice lets us back into a kind of a state of aliveness of about a 7 or 8 year old. One time when I was about 7 years old, I was at Luna Park in Sydney, and there was, I don't even know if it still exists, but there was a place called Coney Island, which was a very old sort of paper mache construction. It had some very interesting things in it. It was like a kind of play palace. It had the most wonderful wooden slides, about 3 stories high, and you could climb right to the top, get onto a piece of old sacking and just go for your life, let go. It had bumps in it, it was just wondrous. But the best thing at Coney Island was the dark maze. Now, the dark maze, you went in through a door, you had no idea what would happen next. In fact, you had no clues because it was totally dark. And you had to feel your way around the twists and turns. It was a bit odd, the place. It sort of was a bit warm in there, a bit strangely warm. But you felt your way with great excited trepidation from point to point to point, till suddenly, as you put your foot forward for the next step, there was nothing at all. In this total dark, there was no place to put the next step. And so it was this sort of coming to the brink of yourself of what is this? Which is, of course, the fundamental question of our practice. What is this? And then after a while, you'd sort of fish around with your foot and try different depths of the space in front of you until you finally found this squishy surface down below that you could step onto. It was very uncanny feeling, squishy, not particularly trustworthy, but you walked as best you could on the squishy surface until you bumped into the next step up. But that feeling of nothing at all and taking the next step into no thing at all, it's very much the spirit of the invitation of our practice. Take that step forward. Every aspect of koan interaction is a form of serious adult play, and even unserious adult play. There's a degree there of shedding the adult move, the immediate adult move of self-preservation, and face, the sense of face. Face is such a huge word for such a extraordinary matter, an intimate matter. You know, the readability of faces, the fact that a face is unrepeatable. And yet, or maybe and so, there's so much adult effort put into composing an acceptable face. And instead, in koan interaction, we're invited to play beyond that sense of face, to inhabit other beings with ease, just as we all are in every interaction we have with each other. Our sentience flows into the sentience of the other. Sentience creates self and other. Sentience and that connecting, that live connecting point between the great and of me and you, is endlessly allowing this flow, the flow of shared sentience between all things. And that's part of what I like to call the improvisation of koan encounter, koan inquiry, bringing a koan response into the Doksan room. In the Doksan room itself, it's a bare stage. There's nothing there much, a few things, but the whole world is there for you to play with, for you to bring forward, for you to inhabit. So it is serious, this form of adult play. After all, life and death is a grave matter. All things pass quickly away. And that sense of, even there, have a look at the vivid sense of play right there in the words of the Jisha that night. If you looked in on a very still dojo, you'd be sort of struck, I think, by there's something going on here that is very intense and interesting, a serious form of adult play with the grave matter of life and death, encountering it, intimately encountering it, not turning away from it, moving with it, and in a way shaping each moment in the moving with life and death. And so when the voice of the Jisha speaks at night in that rather dramatized form, that voice is speaking from beyond the grave. They are the words of the Buddha. And they are speaking from beyond the grave, and they are enjoining us, don't waste this life, don't waste this breath. Each beat of your heart is the only one. Be there for it, be here, be as eternal as that. And so it was discovered, and this has some spirit of play in it. It was discovered by some people after a while that they had slightly, in the Diamond Sangha, they may have misheard grave matter when it was offered as the words of the Jisha to be accepted with respect and gratitude at night. They might have been really saying the great matter. So grave matter, great matter. Ultimately, our path is the path of reconciling these as not to, at all, not to. So now we alternate between grave matter and great matter, and we find we cannot finally tell the difference. Again, this is turning it around, turn things around. One old teacher said, when you turn things around, you become Buddha. Now, surely play is turning things around. And it is also allowing things to just be exactly what is needed. Look at the way children play with objects, and they transform in their hands into exactly what's needed to create that world, to flesh out that world, to let the play proceed. So I might just read a little from Upside Down Zen. It is the rigor of what we do in practice that raises everything to the state of play. Any seriously undertaken work is play in the deepest sense. Zen practice is dedicated to waking us up, enlivening us, quickening us. It might seem paradoxical that the very thing that quickens us is the absolute gravity of the matter at hand. So we begin to play even with our death, our own most personal death. When we truly take on board the grave matter of what is this life? What is this? Where the very sort of, what would you call it, the catch cry of any play is, what is this? What does it need to be now? What is it? What is it? It's a very creative, engaged way of being with even the most difficult circumstances. So play is this rigorous form of testing, of discovery, of imaginative freeing of expectations. Another way of describing it is exactly the sorts of words that are used in improvisation, in theatre improvisation. And the fundamental rule there is accept the offer. If you can't accept the offer of what is being improvised in front of you, if you can't discern, if someone asks a question, if you can't work out immediately, right on point, who that person must be and accept the offer of their move, then the play goes dead. There is actually a great example of this that I recount in Upside Down Zen that actually comes from Keith Johnston's book, Impro. I recommend this book as a Dharma book in disguise, in fact. It's a handbook for actors, but it is a Dharma book in disguise. And he gives an example of an improvisation. Here it is. Say you have two actors playing in an improvisation with absolutely no starting point except that one decides to be a doctor. And so the other is obviously a patient. In such a situation, to say yes is to keep the game alive, to keep the play alive, to keep it moving. To say no, in even the most subtle form, is to kill the improvisation. So the trick here is to accept all offers. So in one of his examples, the first actor might say, oh, and clutch their leg. The second actor might say, oh, my dear, there's something wrong with your leg. The first actor says, yes, I've got a pain in my leg. The second one says, I'm afraid I'll have to remove it. The first actor then says, oh no, don't take my leg, I'm rather attached to it. Now, at that point, it's just starting to go dead. No has been said, the offer has not quite been caught. But how about the second time? It goes through the same moves. Oh, my leg. Oh no, not your leg, I'll have to remove it. And the second actor says, but that's the leg you took last time. So the first actor says, oh no, this is really serious. The second actor says, not woodworm. And so it rolls on. The play is alive because the offers are being accepted. Now, if you can feel the kind of danger in this, value it, because the fact that there's an edge of exhilarating danger in play is part of the edge of the live edge of Zen. Kaz Tanahashi has an interesting thing that he says in Brush Mind about a line that you might make on paper. He says, if it is beautiful, it is not yet dangerous enough. That sense of the immediacy, which of course is dangerous. We don't know what will happen next. We barely know what is happening now. We dream that we know. We inhabit this soft edge dream all the time. And Zen says, wake into the great dream, that all things are dreaming with you, that are waiting for you to wake into. If you have any doubt about the playfulness of the koan kind of path, then, and not even that strictly koan related, but people take their lives as koans with our practice. So I'm talking about the koan path widely here. The path of letting things be turned upside down or turned around, allowing them to show their true face when we are not imposing expectation, supposition, presumption upon them. So if you have any doubt about that, notice the great laughter that comes from the Doksan room. Now this is completely shared laughter. It is not laughing at anything except the impostures of ourselves. If it's laughing at anything, it is sharing the joke that we are, a lot of the time, a kind of imposture even to ourselves. And when that falls away, it's a glorious kind of laughter. There's, in some of the great cases in the koan tradition, there's moments when simply great laughter is the releasing moment. Thomas Hobbes, who is responsible for calling things pretty nasty, what does he say about it? All things are short, nasty and horrible. No, I'm paraphrasing him, but he also is responsible for saying that laughter is our sudden glory. Laughter is the glory of yourself thrown beyond yourself and swimming in it, swimming in the shared current of sentience, of this river of sentience where we are. So koan exchange that we can look at and take to, or learn by heart, take up as a case and respond to in time to the various live koan points within it. It's a little like a ball game in the sense of throwing and catching. Something is thrown, can you catch it? Can you catch it? You know, it's thrown koan to mind and response to teacher and teacher to student. It is an exchange, a kind of communion of exchange, improvisatory in character, born in the moment, and born in the moment of being present to each other. That's what it is. In a way, that's what Teisho is too. It is, Teishos are born in the moment, usually, and it's hard to do this online, but with the sense of what's in the room. What's in the room creates the Teisho. So those great gusts of laughter, accept them as reassuring. They are never separating anybody out. They are including in. There's somehow, as I say in Upside Down Zen, laughter is our sudden glory. It breaks out, shines, rolls away the boulder, and then it dies without trace. And that too is precious. No trace. It's clean. So practice itself, it's almost like the great zero that multiplies everything. And if you know your maths, you know what happens when you multiply anything by zero. It becomes zero, in case you forgot. So this is the spirit of undoing, of unmaking. And I love the fact that it really costs nothing to sit down and meditate, nothing at all. It adds nothing whatsoever to the bottom line of the economy. What a great fact that is. If it adds anything, it is that zero. It multiplies it by zero and says, does that really finally address the deepest matter, the economy? Are we really born into an economy? What a desolate life that would be for human beings. What economy were you born in, people could ask. What is your birthplace in economy? Maybe we should say that. That's a good form of play. Let's do that. Let's ask people, what moment in the economy were you born in? Certain Inuit peoples, when they tell their life story, they actually don't say, I was born here and then I grew up there. And they tell their great dreams and where the great dream happened, the great transforming dreams of their lives. In fact, places get named after great dreams that were dreamt there. This is a very different way of inhabiting the playful, expansive, absorptive kind of sentience that human beings have and are. So, so sometimes I think of koan, play and energy as that dragon energy that we sometimes talk about. The I Ching calls it the creative. It is that sort of spring energy. It's like what's happening here with the wind right now. It's charged with wild sort of dragonish spring energy, electrically charged. Last night there was a sudden thunderstorm from nowhere that passed in about 10 minutes. Just another sort of outbreath of the dragon at the moment. So, as I say here, koan work is a fierce, playful form of dressing up in order to stay profoundly at home. By dressing up, I don't mean putting on something special. I mean dressing up in the play sense. In fact, I started that chapter by describing a short story by Helen Garner, where she is a character called Little Helen. She's about 9, 8 or 9, right on that cusp of starting to be in that place where people say, oh, your shoes are getting so big. Look at your feet, they're getting very big. And the child starts to think, oh, should I apologize for growing? Adults don't know what to do with the child in transition. But in this case, little Helen, she has some cousins in the back shed who are doing something a bit naughty, and she can't be admitted to that area. So she comes back to the house, and the aunt and her mother are dressing up, but they're dressing up in an adult way, and they're being kind of, in her eyes, silly. So when they say, come on in, you can join us, little Helen does not want to, because they don't understand the rules of play. They don't understand. The important thing is the meaning of the dressing up, who you become when you dress up in that. They don't understand how serious it is. And that is the lovely edge of seriousness in the play and the lovely playful edge of the seriousness in Zen. So, working on a koan closely with a teacher may require you to call up the whole great world in all its minute particularities right there in the interview room with an abundant economy of means. The whole world is there at your disposal, so you just use it. Here it is. Immediately, here it is. So a tree, a buffalo passing through a lattice window with no trouble getting the head and horns and the whole body through except for the tiny tail. That, for example, becomes your problem. Why is it that the tiny tail does not pass through? So a stone from the bottom of the sea, whatever it is, it's also like play. It does not have a utilitarian sense. It's not directed towards making one thing become something else. It's directed towards releasing you from thingness itself more freely, more cogently, more playfully. So this is the great guarantee of a koan. It will not make sense. It will not be amenable to any of our usual paths of making sense. It's much more that immediacy of, actually it's like the immediacy of dream in a way that in a dream something can become something else without the slightest interruption or even surprise. You know how I can remember a dream in which some of those electrical PowerPoints, with their sort of two eyes and a mouth, if you look at them from in a certain way, they became a series of gospel singers singing gospel in the corner. There was no problem. When something makes it shift like that, how easily in dream you let it keep opening the way that has it's not built by expectation. It unfolds with the way that the wind unfolds itself, and everything moves with that wind. Okay, so it's a little bit like old Chinese saying, if you keep the green branch in your heart, the singing bird will come. You could say that Zazen, if you let it, greens the branch of your heart. It greens it up. It makes it more like playful. It has more of the eros of play about it. And the singing bird will come. Well, also the crow will start calling into the dojo with all its wise words. But the singing bird will come in the sense of just what is needed, that upward tilt of your spirit that is more receptive, more present, more willing to be present. So the work of the way is not about pleasing. It is more dangerous than pleasing. It's about true, coming as true, which is the actual translation of the word Tathagata. Come as true. So this is the gift of unstinting and yet rigorous and yet loving play that we call zazen, or we call it ceremony, or we call it ritual. But in every case, it is that necessary restrictiveness that creates the room for the unexpected to emerge. And it allows it to be very alive in each other's presence without interrupting or bumping into each other. So all of this is how we're founded in play. And of course, there's two foundation stories to our tradition. One, of course, is the Buddha under the Bodhi tree and just tilting his gaze upward enough at some point to see the morning star, either rising or setting in that moment. Venus, huge in the low edge of the sky. And there was no difference at all left anywhere. None, no difference. And there's therefore no star, no Buddha, no tree, nothing. and of course each thing, but no thingness there at all. Another founding story is the one of, which I'll read you now, from the case in the Gateless Gate. Once in ancient times, when the world-honoured one was at Mount Gradakata, which means vulture peak, by the way, he twirled a flower before his assembled disciples. All was silent. Only Kashyapa, Mahakashyapa, broke into a smile. And then the world-honoured one said, I have the eye treasury of right Dharma, the subtle mind of Nirvana, the true form of no form, and the flawless gate of the teaching. It is not established upon words and phrases. It is a special transmission outside tradition. I now entrust this to Mahakashyapa. So the simple twirling of a flower in front of everybody. Somehow, Kashyapa broke into a smile at the sight of this. And in fact, Robert Aitken notes in his Taisho on this case, a commentary on this case, that a truer translation of smiled would be cracked his face. He cracked his face with a smile. The smile cracked his face. So that's a crack in the very riddle of face itself, is it not? We spend so much time building up a sober sense of adulthood, a detailed play of sanity. And at this moment, that whole vast contrivance is cracked apart by just the twirling of a simple flower. And the twirling of the flowers stops everything in that moment. Everything has stopped. This is radical play. And that's where our whole path is founded, there, in this radical play of truly stopping, moving with the turning world so completely we truly stop. And then there's no thing is there. Nothing carved out from anything else beginning with this sense of me, not carved out. So let's have a look at, well, not so much a look as let's play with a couple of some of the more obviously, directly playful koans.